Andrew Brunson from North Carolina was a Christian pastor in Turkey, along with his wife Noreen and his children, for 23 years. He's arrested in October of 2016. When we found out his charges, we realized if he was found guilty, he'd be sentenced to prison for 35 years. He's 50 years old at this time, so that would be a life sentence, almost like a death sentence, if you will. He was charged with terrorism, which, when we actually translated from Turkish, was Christianization. So we launched a global campaign.
The president's leading the charge here to get our client released, and he knows how to negotiate.
What did he do to wind up in prison?
Well, the charge actually, when we got the indictment, the charge was Christianization. I mean, that's what it said in the actual, when you translated the Turkish, it was Christianization. That was, he was sharing the gospel in Turkey at a church.
We got U.S. senators visiting Pastor Brunson in prison when they went to Turkey.
We have to continue to apply pressure until he is back in the United States with his wife, Noreen, and reunited with his family.
Pastor Andrew Brunson has been released from jail in Turkey. He is being sent home to the United States. This has just happened. The court just released Pastor Brunson. He's being turned over to U.S. custody. He will be flown to the United States of America. Many of you have been praying for this day. I want to thank you. I know the pastor and his entire family want to thank you as well. And of course, a huge thank you to the president and his team for securing the release of Andrew Brunson.
And ultimately, he is released in October 2018 and returned back home to the United States of America with his wife and his family.
So we have good news. Pastor Andrew Brunson is in the air from Turkey. We're very honored to have him back with us. He suffered greatly, but we're very appreciative to a lot of people.
You know, when Pastor Brunson got back to the United States, he got to visit with President Trump in the Oval Office and actually pray for President Trump. It was amazing. A lot of people saw it. It was live on television. He was recently at our office here, where he got to meet with a lot of our staff from our digital team, our radio team, social media departments that did so much on his behalf, yet are more behind the scenes. And so Pastor Brunson was able to visit with his wife Noreen and actually talk to the group, thank the group. It's very moving, to say the least, for all of us at the American Center for Law and Justice.
Almost a year ago was October 12, 2018. American pastor Andrew Brunson was finally released from being wrongfully detained in Turkey.
There was not a dull day in Turkey. Nothing was boring.
We assumed that we would be there for the rest of our lives. We were called into the police station. We thought we were going to be receiving long-term residence permits, which we had applied for. And then they told us they were going to deport us. But the idea that they would keep me in prison was, no one had thought that.
When we translated the charges, the terrorism that they were talking about actually translated from Turkish into Christianization.
It was over 2 years of daily working, going to D.C. and going to the Working Group on Arbitrary Detention at the United Nations.
I was standing in a Turkish courtroom and I was convicted of terrorism, and I thought I was going back to prison. And within a day, we're in the White House.
We're grateful to God, obviously, for the grace that he gave us and the wisdom that he gave us and the endurance that he gave you, Andrew.
We are so thankful for ACLJ.
Well, I appreciate that. I know all of our members do too.
This was a victory for Pastor Brunson. This was a victory over Christian persecution. But there is a lot more Christians being persecuted in the world. Sometimes it's individually, like in the case of Pastor Brunson or Pastor Saul in China. Sometimes it is genocidal levels, like what we see by ISIS and other Islamic groups who are trying to wipe out entire Christian communities. We see this in Africa as well, with groups that have kidnapped young girls and forced them to try and convert. We have a project, it's called BeHeard Project. If you go to BeHeardProject.com, so you can get involved in these critical cases to protect Christianity, whether it's an individual Christian being persecuted because of their faith, or an entire group of Christians who are at the cusp of being totally wiped out. Go to BeHeardProject.com.